Most folks on these trains are pretty much up to date on the news, so you probably know that our country's been facing supply chain issues, labor shortages, that kind of thing. So the mines had to deal with that too. So our tour was 50 minutes. Now it's 2 minutes and 19 seconds. So I hope you liked it. And if you liked it, come back tomorrow and bring your friends, okay? No, actually, there's a lot more to see. And we're very lucky because we're at the very ground zero that all the mining that took place in Bisbee, Arizona. They were coal miners. And they had something in common with those copper miners down in this mine. They would drill holes in it, pack those holes with dynamite, or in the early days black powder, and then blast it apart. And by drilling those holes in a particular pattern, they ended up with what they wanted. And you're saying, well, what did they want? Well, they wanted this rock right here. This is called, in these sizes, this is called muck. And the smelter was a place where they took that rock out and they pulverized it in great big hammer mills. Bam, 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 bam! And it would pulverize it, and then they put it into big vats and melted it. Can you imagine what it takes to melt rock? But anyway, that's what they did. Now they were smart about it, and so they got the waste out, took that over there to the tailings piles. Then they would skim it, and they got out the good stuff, like that malachite. They would separate that out, and they got the copper. Then they separated it out into mining cars, and then they took those mining cars to El Paso, and that's where the refinery broke it down even further and made it into good and useful metals like copper. Then they would skim it again to skim off the silver. Then they would skim it finally to skim off the heaviest metal, and you know what that is. Gold, yeah. They would skim off the gold and put it in those ore cars. It was in a very crude state then, but they took it to that refinery, and then they knew how to break it down. So in 1877 they started digging, and they started out looking for that gold and silver, and then time went on. They figured out, this copper might be good for something too. And at first they didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to process it. They didn't have any use for it. But then as time went on, people like Thomas Edison, yeah, you heard of him. A guy named Nikola Tesla, yeah, they figured out a way to harness electricity. And so all of a sudden, we needed copper wire to move that electricity from place to place, hook up those motors, hook up the telegraph from New York City to San Francisco. Thousands of miles of copper wire. Copper made all those things possible, and it changed the way of life. So what were they doing? They had to pull that out of here. Where'd they get that copper wire and that copper pipe? From rocks just like that one. From places just like this one. So this is part of their culture. This is part of their way of life down here underground. And my neighbor has one of these in his front yard. Well, I don't think two people ever sat on it together, quite honestly. It seems kind of over-engineered.
Really? Look at this, they use bolts and
Also, there's a reddish brownish ore called hematite, and then there's also galena, which has lead and silver in it. So this was a bonanza mine. Copper, gold from the hematite, galena for the lead and the silver. So this was quite the place. So they did have fatalities, 384 fatalities in that 97-year time. And miners would fall into a hole, they'd get kicked in the head by a mule, they'd grab a hold of a uninsulated wire. So things did happen down here, but all in all their safety record was actually pretty good, considering that they were here for 97 years and considering the fact that they had 4,000 miners working here in a single day, 2,000 in the morning shift and 2,000 in the afternoon. So all the things that could go wrong, and there were plenty of them, they actually did pretty well, all in all. Now they did have somebody to protect him. You say, well, who? Well, when they found his face in the rock, they left it there. And they called that guy, they called him Headless John. And Headless John was the spirit of the mine. And they thought he was the guy that was like the guardian angel. Now in the early days they did it all by hand, with hand chisels and hammers, but then they got more advanced equipment like these drills right here.